All right. So December 23rd, 2022. Yes, thank you for reminding me. On January 7th, I'm teaching a day-long retreat around the topic of my new old book, Living Kindness. It's going to be in Oakland. Let me see if I can find it on my website. It's not there where it should be. So it's on the calendar on my website under upcoming events. And so it's going to be, I'm going to have new copies of the book for sale. And here's the link to the page that shows it, where it is. It's at the East Bay Community Space where I was a couple months ago. And Paul, who ran that event, since it was so successful, I reached out to him to help me to do it. And so come for all or part of the day if you can. It will be live. That will not be on Zoom. At least I don't have it planned as a Zoom event unless somebody, organizes that. And what else? Oh, well, on the 27th of December. So that's January 7th, which is Saturday or Sunday. I think Saturday. And then just as a reminder, that book is coming out on next Tuesday. And it's going to come out in all the available formats. It's going to come out as paperback, as ebook, and as an audiobook all at the same time. Just kind of cool. I'm impressed with Shambhala has done a really great job. I don't always love publishing companies, as I may have whined about them before. So, as I said, we'll meditate for 20 minutes and then we'll talk some more. I think, read from Burning Desire. We've actually arrived at step 3, a turning point, if there ever was one. So let's settle in. So just finding a comfortable way of sitting or lying down, however you're most comfortable in meditating. You can close your eyes or just lower your gaze, turning the attention inward. Beginning by into your body, sensations in the body, how you're holding your body, any tension or tightness, seeing if you can release and soften. You can feel your breath, just the movement of the body, breathing. And then the feeling tone or the mood, emotional energy, however you characterize that, how you're feeling right now. This might also have a physical component. When we say feeling, it has these two meanings: feeling as a sensation in the body and feeling as an emotion. And when we begin to investigate those things, we find that they are actually intertwined, not really separate, and that they also interact with each other. Sensations triggering emotions, emotions triggering sensations. Of feeling the breath with the body sensations and with the mood or feeling tone. You can call this breathing into the felt experience. And then letting the attention come in more closely to the breath, the in breath, the out breath. You can feel the breath at the nostrils, the touch of air, or in the belly and diaphragm moving, expanding and contracting. So we have this simple practice, awareness of breath, the body, and feelings. But often the simplicity of that is interrupted by the complications of mind, of thought. So instead of being just in a relaxed presence, we get lost in stories, plans or worries, memories or regrets, calculations, analyses. Our practice is to notice this and come back. See if you can let go of the thinking. Connect with the breath again, the body. possible to tap into a pleasant feeling, nothing dramatic, but just a pleasant underlying sense of peace, even joy or lightness that comes by just being present, even for a few moments to step out of the complications of mind. Just enjoy breathing, enjoy being alive. Even just a few moments of connecting in this way can brighten, transform our day. Sense of relief, like landing. Now see if you can tune in more precisely to the feelings of breathing. Breathing in, breathing out. As we sit in stillness, settle, there's an increasing clarity. Sometimes we don't utilize it, so we have to remind ourselves to kind of intensify very gently, gracefully, the effort to feel the sensations, the subtlety, the stream of sensation, ever changing. All right. Nice to set aside time to meditate. Um, you know, it isn't really that important what happens when you're meditating. Just just put in some time being quiet, just very healing. And it often, I think, also lets things that need to come up, and then things that need to go down maybe. There's this way in which it's kind of like a filter to me. It kind of catches the things that need to get caught, and then lets through the things that just don't really need that. Um, yeah, and I guess just thinking about meditating on Zoom. What a funny thing we do, and it really speaks to the importance of Sangha. That um, even though we're each in our own space, and in some sense we are each alone, but what does it mean to be together? What does it mean to be alone? But certainly that hunger to be together, to have connection. Yeah, is that's very much expressed by everybody showing up, and I appreciate people showing up, on this at this time of year, and this, uh, when there's so much alcohol in the air, not just in the air, but on the ground, in people's glasses and bottles, and I don't know if you guys are, how many of you are, going to social activities where there are people drinking, but I'm going to one tomorrow night, and so it's great to. In fact, I guess my social activity at Levi Stadium tomorrow there will be some probably some beer happening there. Yeah, very weird. Um, we've been talking about the problems of sports, and my friend who was over here, the singer who was here today, was very uh, a very powerful person, as a being, not as as some political or otherwise kind of power, but his talking about why he doesn't watch sports was impactful. Not that it was going to stop me from watching sports, but just to acknowledge all the complications, and I mean, we, just living in, our living with other human beings just create complications, right? And having countries and societies. Okay, now I don't mean to be rambling, but so I'm gonna come back to the topic of tonight. So as I mentioned, so I'm back with my book, A Burning Desire, Dharma, God, and the Path of Recovery, and been working through this now for probably most of this year, and just got to to step 3, and I call step 3 diving in, and then there's a subtitle, beginning the path. But it starts by, well, it says step 3 starts by saying we made a decision. So we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. And so a lot of this, well, this part starts by being about decisions. So I thought I would talk a little bit before I read it. And who knows? Maybe I won't even read it if I talk enough about decisions. about the role of decision making and the problem of decision making in recovery and in life, I guess. If you're in the book, I have on page 151. But the idea of this, part of the idea of this step is that we're going to somehow change the way we make decisions, I think. Because we're sort of turning our will and our lives over to the care of God. Is like, oh, I'm going to sort of base my decision making on something else. And, and there's always this problem of like, oh, is God going to talk to me? Am I schizophrenic, or, am I psychic? What's going on? And all of that, I think, is beside the point to a great extent. That's just kind of looking for trouble. But then we are faced with this challenge of making decisions. And as addicts, again, I talk about this, that, our decision making is not good. We wouldn't have become addicts if we were making good decisions. But the question of how we then are going to make decisions in recovery, and what to do, and certainly when I started to really work a recovery program, one of the first thing I did was kind of start to ask for help in making decisions. And I think that a lot of what happened in early recovery was having someone help me to see how to make decisions. Which means, first of all, stepping out of my initial impulses so that I'm not making decisions out of reactive habits, that I'm not grasping or acting out of aversion or delusion, that I'm looking at all the circumstances. And then there's this, meditation is really helpful, because meditation really strengthens our intuition, because when we let go of the surface noise of the mind, the underlying wisdom has space to move up into consciousness. But I guess the one thing I've taken to, one of the things that's sort of become one of my regular answers to people when they come to me asking for help in making a decision, the first question I ask is there a deadline on making your decision? Because I think very often we make decisions quickly, not because they need to be made, but because we're uncomfortable with not knowing. And so being able to become comfortable with not knowing allows sometimes for decisions to make themselves, like the thing that you thought you needed to solves itself, or maybe even more obviously, you get more information with time. And of course, your own thinking process unfolds with time as well. So I always want to know, well, do you have to decide right now? How about just wait a little while? And I think of that, it's interesting because the work I was doing with my friend, singer Milton is his name today, it reminds me that creative work is also about making decisions. You're always making choices as an artist, as a writer, as a musician. Oh, how many verses I'm going to have? Where should the bridge go? And I tend to be very controlling in those type of situations. And inviting him in to work on this song with me, I set the intention to invite his input so that I didn't make all the decisions, because again, it's like that control, right? So much decision making is about control. Oh, I get to decide. I get have the way, and then there's this fear. Other people are going to mess it up, or other, what if someone wants me to do something I don't want to do, and so that letting go of the need to control is really important. And I'm going to read it after I say this, I think, but because again, thinking about decision and choices in context of the arts and the what I've been writing, the thing that may become a book that I've been working on, I keep getting to these places where I'm stuck, and there's this impulse to quit, because I don't have the answer. I don't know what to do about this particular. Well, maybe I can just abandon the whole thing, because again, that discomfort of like, well, maybe I'll just wait. And at times, in fact, a lot of the time, especially the last few months, I'll go for 2 weeks without writing anything, which is very unusual for me when I'm working on a writing project. And then something will click and I'll sit down and I'll write. And it might only be a paragraph. It took me like 2 weeks to figure out to write this one paragraph, which is like not acceptable to me. Like, to me, you're supposed to write 1,000 words a day. That's the way it's done. If you're not doing that, well, then throw it out and start something else. Again, it's like letting go of control, and trusting in a process. And I know that sounds like it's kind of drifting away from decisions, but to me, it is very much about these choices and decisions. And because decisions and choices are also about solving problems and coming up with answers for things. And again, the value and the power in being able to not have an answer and sit with not knowing, really, really, it's another one of those powers that we can develop as spiritual practitioners, as meditators, the power to sit with not knowing. All right. Well, that's my pre-talk. So I'll read a little bit from this section. So step 3 starts by saying we made a decision. For an addict or alcoholic, just making a decision, any decision, is progress. When you're out there drinking and using, you don't decide, first I'll roll out of bed at 2 p.m., then I'll start the day with a glass of wine and a joint. Then I'll flip out on my partner and run screaming around the house. Then I'll eat something and purge, snort some coke, break down crying, and maybe shoot some heroin. I don't know what addict I'm describing here. This is somebody who's really in trouble. You don't plan these things. You just react to every craving, every resentment, every trigger, every out-of-control feeling. When we actually make a decision, that is, consider our options and choose the one that seems most sensible or practical, we are already moving away from addictive behavior. From the time I was a teenager, I was reacting. I dropped out of high school because I didn't like the way school felt. I didn't care about the consequences. I didn't want to feel that way, bored and oppressed. I became a musician because it felt good to play the guitar. I didn't think about what kind of career I would have, what kind of life. Well, yes, I thought about it, but only in a completely diluted way. I'm going to be a star. How was that going to happen? Who knows? It just was. Eventually, I became stuck in my identity as a musician. I didn't believe I could do anything other than play the guitar, so naturally, I couldn't. I was afraid to try anything else, so naturally, I didn't. More reactivity, and still no real decision-making. Through the confused and chaotic final years of drinking and using, as I swung between intense spiritual practices and alcoholism, my reactivity started to go off the rails. I'll do this meditation. Wait, I'll follow this guru. No, wait, just let me get high. If I can just sell this song, I'll be okay. I need a woman. I need a job. I need a drug. I need a drink, a savior. This could be a song right here. I think I've got the lyrics are right here. Good beat. It's got a beat. You can dance to it. Even my decision to get sober was another reaction to the madness that had overcome me. Finally, though, that reaction led me to enough clarity to begin to make decisions. Not right away, as my first year of sobriety was still a bit of a pinball ride. But when I finally got a sponsor and started to take the program seriously, I actually started to consider where I was in my life and what I needed to do. I needed a job as music wasn't cutting it, and now I was ready to do whatever it took. One of the side effects of marijuana can be a sensitivity that makes any conflict or difficulty unmanageable. When I was stoned, I didn't want to do anything I didn't want to do, which is the definition of a job, isn't it? This guy is pretty funny. And which is the definition of a job, doing something you don't want to do. Something you do even though you don't want to because you need the money. Hopefully, of course, we progress beyond this type of job, but in the beginning, they are often like this. With the dope and booze out of my system, I had a lot more tolerance. I made a decision to get a messenger job because I had a car and a license and jobs were available. Not an unreasonable decision, if I do say so. I also decided to start my own band because I had the skills to lead a band, I had connections for gigs, and I was tired of working for other band leaders. More reasonable decision-making. Finally, at 3 years sober, I made one of the biggest decisions of my life. I was going to go to college. Such a decision would have been unimaginable for me before I was sober. My beliefs about myself, that I hated school, that I couldn't do it, my beliefs about school, that it was pointless, that it would take too long, all these beliefs and more stood in my way. But now it became clear that it was the most sensible thing to do. I didn't want to go on being a starving musician. There was an inexpensive community college nearby that I could enroll in. I was discovering that I did like to learn, and I was realizing that I had other talents than playing the guitar. All of this made sense. It's amazing in some ways to realize how nonsensical my earlier life was, how irrational and thoughtless I was. Amazing and sad. So many of us get caught in these reactive habits, never able to see clearly, never able to choose wisely, never able to approach life in any kind of a rational way. This is the disease of addiction. When we make a decision in step 3, ironically enough, given the thrust of the step toward taking guidance from God, we are actually taking more rational control of our lives. Even as our lives become more oriented toward the spiritual, we are learning to be more practical as well. So, once again, I'm reading this and I left out one line. It's like, it's enough. But I'm reading this and thinking, oh, this is all stories about me. But I'm hoping that you're thinking about yourself as I'm reading that. It's not, I'm not reading it to tell you about me. I'm reading it to trigger something, some memory or some connection in you. And I guess that comes out of my understanding that addicts have certain core similarities in that we share certain things, and the story, the details of the story can vary tremendously, and yet the underlying tendencies, I think, are very often shared. And certainly I would not write that stuff if I didn't think that. I really don't. I'm not trying to tell write my autobiography or my memoir, but I think that I'm trying to track this kind of thinking and these traps that we get into, because we talk about addiction, and I won't say we do. I think the larger world, the non-addiction world or whatever recovery world, talks about addiction as though it's just about oh, it's those drugs and the booze and the food or the sex or whatever the thing is, and they just need to stop doing that. And this isn't about that at all, right? This is about the trap of being in a mind that became addicted. But what was going on? What was behind that? And this isn't to suggest that this is all of the cause in that, but it's pointing to another one of those things that we get caught in, this inability to make rational decisions. And of course, it makes sense that we wouldn't be making rational decisions if we're intoxicated. And the very fact that we were getting intoxicated was an irrational thing to do. So it just coming out of that and learning how to live is an essential part. Obviously, it's just not enough to say, okay, I don't drink or use anymore. It's like, well, what the hell do I do? That's what I knew how to do. That's how I knew how to live. I have to find a new way of living it. And before I even find a new way of living, I have to find a new way of thinking about life, about myself, about my life. How do I figure this all out? And fortunately, yeah, for many of us, hopefully, I hope you've all found people along the way who helped you to figure that out, as I did. That I'm not sure if I could have figured it out on my own, or even just by going to meetings. Just having an individual sponsor for a few years. I mean, it was quite a few years, but particularly the first few years were the key ones, who would, kind of mirror and question and make simple suggestions about how to navigate life. It just really helped me so much to figure out how to move forward and how to make decisions. Yeah, that seems like enough for me to say for now. So I welcome people to share or to chime in, or to ask a question, or whatever you like. One of the, I don't know if I'll call this skill, but abilities that someone in my position has to learn is the ability to sit through the awkward silence. Because somebody eventually is going to feel so uncomfortable that they're going to speak up, or maybe somebody's holding something back, and they're, finally will feel brave enough to speak up. And it's Monica, the winner. Thanks, Monica.
I have a lot of not conflicting, but ideas swirling around. But I did want to say, when I became sober, I was afraid to be a musician and a singer anymore, because how could I ever do any of that without being loaded?
Yeah.
And with the whole thing about changing playgrounds and play things, that was tough. But another thought came to me about right view. Is it, in a way, if we could tie in the third step to like right view,
Yeah.
The noble truth, would be like a decision to get the right view, or I'm not saying it right, but would it may be making well, I came to believe that a power greater than myself can restore me to sanity. But the karma could restore me to sanity. How do we tie it in, I guess, is my question.
I think, I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind, certainly not the last answer, but the Four Noble Truths are about how suffering arises and how we let go of suffering.
Yeah.
And so one of the questions we can ask ourselves when we're making a decision is this going to lead to more suffering or less suffering? And the other thing to notice is, and this, because what's the cause of suffering? Well, grasping or craving, right? So am I making this decision out of a craving, or is it coming from somewhere, less driven? Does it feel more intuitive, or does it feel more like, oh, I need to do this? And so tuning in on the felt level, as well as reflecting on long-term consequences, right? Which is, again, not something that addicts do, right? We don't think about like what's going to happen tomorrow if I get drunk tonight. That's tomorrow. I'm living in the present, even if I'm drunk, that kind of delusion we have. So that ability to check, like, oh, okay, where does this lead? Is this aiming towards suffering? And then what's the feeling inside me? What's the pull? So that's where I would see it connected to the Four Noble Truths. And I think that's a really good observation on your part. Like, right view, in the most general sense, is like looking at things realistically, having a dharmic viewpoint rather than a self-centered viewpoint, and looking at things with wisdom. And of course, then again, wise choices come out of that place. Yeah. And
thank you. Sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to thank you that, on a Friday night in a very cold Colorado tonight,
yeah,
that I'm being very reflective myself. So that kind of came to me.
Well, in the literal dark days of the winter, I think it's really natural human tendency to reflect, right? And that's why we have our, New Year's resolutions, and it's a time when we turn inward, very natural.
Well, and I was thinking also, wouldn't it have been nice to know what I know, to be studying what I'm studying now, but I wouldn't have been ready for it. I was just running around being afraid all the time in the first year of sobriety. So, but thank you.
Yeah. Regrets. I have a few. Deborah, hello.
Good evening. I just wanted to remind you that it is Friday night and we're a little more quiet on Fridays.
Oh, is that right?
But it's the truth, or my observation.
Okay, interesting. I'll put that in my, memory bank. Try to remember for it in the future.
I think that Monica was hitting on fear at the end of her talk. And I think that's really a big thing about making a decision for sobriety is, the addict knows that's real comfortable. And when faced with the choice of, oh my God, that's a whole new world out there, it's really hard to figure or to accept or hope that one has the tenacity to go forward and participate in the change, even with the help of Dharma.
Yeah.
It's trust.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, you're right. I mean, at least during when we are sort of in the functional stages of addiction, it's really, it feels like a safe thing, and the idea of letting go of that seems not at all wise. It seems very dangerous. Why would I do that? I'm fine, and it's that way in which we can just shrink our world down to this very limited activities and interactions. I mean, I have that tendency naturally anyway. I mean, my daughter's like, yeah, we're going to go to the football game tomorrow. I'm like, that's great. We have to drive there, and there's going to be a parking lot, and then it's going to be thousands of people, and they're going to be screaming, and I don't know, it might be cold. I might get cold. I don't know. I could watch the game on television. It's really safe here. She's an adventurer. She's someone who's always looking for the next new thing. And it's so interesting then to see that, to realize that, oh, there are different ways of being. It's not like, oh yeah, everybody's like me. Like, no, that's not the way it is. Some people are afraid to just sit. Like, she doesn't meditate, not to cast aspersions, but lots of people are afraid to just sit with themselves, or the idea of a routine and staying home is like, that's so boring, man. I can't stand it. I need to go. I need to do something. So it's always something, right? Each of us have to deal with our own impulses and look at where they're leading us, because any one of them can, if we're out of balance, too extreme, it can lead to, problems and unhappiness. Yeah. What else do I want to talk about? I'm thinking about I was in touch with my student, soon to be able to call him my friend after he stops being my student. He's in the teacher training program, who's he's in Ukraine and is Ukrainian, and we had exchanged greetings today. He was, I will say that, I wrote to him and told him, how inspiring I found, the speech from his president to our Congress. And he wrote back, Mikhail wrote back saying, everybody in Ukraine was watching that speech, and it gives us so much hope. And knowing that we have the support of the United States, and it gives us the strength to deal with, as he called it, the inconveniences. And the inconveniences are like no heat, power, forget about things like Wi-Fi, and being like, bombed. So, yeah, it's very strange from this place of privilege, and maybe it's wrong, but I will say anyway that for me, there's a certain gift in being able to be in touch with somebody who's living through that. Not like, oh, I'm so lucky to be here in Berkeley where they're not bombing me, but just, I guess, really to stay honest about what the world is. Life is not the privilege for most people. It's not the comfort and safety that I have, and I'm grateful that that at least our country, as a power, is trying to help his country. It's rare. I'm such a, it's hard for me to say I'm a pacifist, because I really do just have such a, I just really despise the concept of war. But in these circumstances, I could, I would never, it's just foolish and naive to say, well, just stop fighting, I was talking to him last week and asked him about leaving. He's, I think, in his late 30s and has a teenage daughter, his wife, and he reminded me that he's not allowed to leave the country. Then the only reason he hasn't been conscripted is because he's in graduate school, apparently. So he's a psychologist, who had a mindfulness center in Mykolaiv. His name is Mikhail, so it gets confusing. Mykolaiv, and sometimes he calls it Nikolaev. I guess it's like a Russian versus the Ukrainian name. And his city has been, pretty much demolished, So a sweet, man who's trying to bring mindfulness to Ukraine, and he's still doing it. He's still helping people. It's quite remarkable. So I just had that on my mind. I guess it's sort of a, little bit of a Christmas story, us, when we think about others less fortunate. So maybe think about those less fortunate. I don't mean to be like sounding like some sort of, whatever priest, but this is certainly a time, many of us are very, very fortunate. I know that I've been more fortunate than I have, can say that I've deserved. So maybe sending at least thoughts of loving kindness to Mikhail and his wife and daughter, and to all the beings at war who don't wish to be at war. Well, not to leave you on a sad note, but may all beings be free from suffering, and may humans find a way to cease their hatred.